My best man cheated with my fiancée the night before our wedding. She was never meant to begin with. He smirked as he showed me the texts. I didn't react. But this morning, he woke up to his life shattered. My name is Jake. I'm 29 years old, and today was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I was meant to marry Emily, the woman who had captured my heart with her infectious laugh and eyes that could light up any room. We had planned this day for years, every detail meticulously thought out, every moment anticipated. Then there's Mark, my best friend since we were kids, the guy who always had my back, or so I thought. He was to be my best man, the one who would stand by my side as I took my vows. The night before the wedding, we gathered at a quaint little restaurant in town for the rehearsal dinner. The air was thick with joy, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. Emily looked radiant, her smile brighter than the candles on the tables. Mark, as always, was the life of the party, his stories making everyone laugh. But as the night wore on, something felt off. Emily seemed distant, her usual warmth replaced by a cool detachment. And Mark, he was unusually attentive to her, his eyes lingering a bit too long, his touch a bit too familiar. As the dinner wound down, I noticed them in a corner, whispering. Their heads close, their voices low. I tried to shake off the unease, chalking it up to wedding jitters or last-minute planning. But then, Mark glanced my way, and his smirk sent a chill down my spine. Why was Emily acting so strangely? What was Mark up to? The questions gnawed at me as I watched them from across the room. Emily's laughter, usually so comforting, now felt like a knife twisting in my gut. Mark's hand on her arm, a touch that seemed too intimate, too knowing. I remember, the last toast of the night, the glasses raised high, the cheers echoing around us. But all I could focus on was the way Emily avoided my gaze, how Mark's eyes seemed to challenge me. As we left the restaurant, the night air was crisp, but it did nothing to cool the heat of my suspicions. Emily and I walked back to our hotel. In silence, her hand in mine felt like a formality, a facade of the love we once shared. In our room, I tried to talk to her, to understand what was happening. Her responses were evasive, her eyes not meeting mine. She said she was just tired, overwhelmed by the day's events, but her words felt hollow, like she was reciting lines from a script she didn't believe in. That night, I lay awake. The sounds of the city outside our window a stark contrast to the silence between us. My mind replayed the evening. Every look, every touch, every whispered word. What was Mark's game, and why was Emily playing along? The questions haunted me, the answers just out of reach, like shadows that fled when you tried to grasp them. As dawn approached, the weight of the day ahead pressed down on me. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, but my heart was heavy. I couldn't shake the feeling from last night. I decided to confront Mark, hoping it was all just my imagination. I found him in his hotel room, looking unusually smug. "Hey Mark, can we talk?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Sure, buddy, what's up?" Mark replied, his tone light, but his eyes were calculating. I hesitated, then asked, "Is there something going on with you and Emily?" Mark's smirk widened and he pulled out his phone, showing me a string of messages between him and Emily. My heart sank as I read the flirtatious texts, the plans to meet up last night. "I guess I won," he said, his voice dripping with arrogance. Didn't say a word. I just turned and walked away, my mind racing with betrayal and confusion. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed, the weight of the world pressing down on me. The room felt too small, the walls closing in. Emily was in the bathroom, getting ready for what was supposed to be our perfect day. I could hear the soft hum of her hairdryer, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. I knew I had to make a decision. The thought of going through with the wedding, pretending everything was fine, was unbearable. But confronting Emily, seeing the truth in her eyes, was equally daunting. I stood up, my legs shaky, and walked to the bathroom door. I knocked gently, my hand trembling. "Emily, we need to talk," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She opened the door, her face a mask of confusion and concern. "What's wrong, Jake?" she asked, her voice laced with worry. I took a deep breath, the words heavy in my throat. "I saw the messages, Emily. Between you and Mark." Her eyes widened, then dropped to the floor. "Jake, It's not what you think," she stammered, but her voice lacked conviction. "It's exactly what I think," I said, my voice firm now, the anger rising. "How could you? With my best friend." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I couldn't tell if they were from guilt or fear of losing what we had. "It was a mistake, Jake. A terrible mistake," she pleaded, reaching for my hand. I pulled away, the touch of her skin feeling like a betrayal. "A mistake? You planned to meet him last night. How many times, Emily? How many times did you sneak off with him?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "It was just once, I swear. I was confused, overwhelmed. I didn't know what I was doing." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the woman I loved, but someone I didn't recognize. "I can't do this, Emily. Not today, not ever." This sentence is grammatically correct, but it could be more impactful by specifying the emotional turmoil Jake is experiencing. I spent the night in a daze, unable to sleep, my mind replaying the messages over and over, each replay twisting the knife of betrayal deeper. By morning, I had made my decision. I wouldn't confront them. I would let karma take its course. The first thing I did was call in a favor from an old friend who worked at the DMV. With a few keystrokes, Mark's car was reported as totaled in an accident. His insurance would now be a nightmare to deal with, a small taste of the chaos I wanted him to experience. Next, I contacted Mark's boss. Anonymously, of course. I tipped them off about Mark's side business, the one he thought was his little secret. It wasn't exactly legal, and I knew it would raise some serious eyebrows at his workplace. Then came the pièce de résistance. I hacked into Mark's social media accounts. It was surprisingly easy. He always used the same password. I posted his deepest, darkest secrets, things he had told me in confidence over the years. Secrets that would not only ruin his reputation, but also make him the talk of the town for all the wrong reasons. As I watched the chaos unfold from a distance, I felt a cold satisfaction. Mark's phone was blowing up with calls from his boss, his insurance, and friends who had seen his posts. Each ring was like a symphony to my ears, a melody of justice served cold. But what would happen when Mark realized Jake was behind all this? The thought lingered in my mind as I sat in my hotel room, the morning light casting long shadows across the floor. I knew Mark would piece it together eventually. He wasn't stupid, just overly confident in his own invulnerability. I could imagine him now, his face contorted in confusion and anger as he tried to salvage what was left of his life. He'd start with his car, calling the insurance company, only to be met with a barrage of questions and complications. Then, his work would call him in for an urgent meeting, where his side hustle would be laid bare. And finally, his social media would be a minefield of public shaming and private despair. I didn't feel guilty. Not after what he did. Not after the betrayal. Emily, on the other hand, was a different story. I had loved her, truly. But now, all I could see was the image of her and Mark, their whispered words, their secret smiles. It was like watching a movie where the plot twist was so obvious yet so devastating. I knew she'd be hurt by the fallout, but she had made her choice. She had chosen to step into the shadows with Mark, and now those shadows were engulfing them, both. The day stretched on, and I found myself wandering through the city, the weight of my actions settling in. I wasn't proud of what I had done, but I wasn't sorry either. It was a necessary evil, a way to balance the scales that had been tipped so unfairly against me. As the sun began to set, casting an orange glow over the buildings, I received a text. It was from an unknown number, but I knew who it was. "Jake, we need to talk." I stared at the message, my heart racing. This was it, the moment Mark realized I was the architect of his downfall. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. I walked back to the hotel, the streets now quiet, the city preparing for the night. My mind was clear, my resolve firm. I had set the wheels in motion, and now I would watch from the sidelines as the drama unfolded. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Mark would retaliate, and when he did, I would be ready. Because in this game of betrayal and revenge, I had just made my first move. Mark, now in a state of panic, tried to piece together what had happened. He called me, his voice a mix of anger and desperation. "Jake, what the hell is going on? My car, my job, my life is falling apart." I remained silent, letting the weight of his actions sink in. "I know it was you," he said, his voice cracking. "You did this, didn't you?" I didn't confirm or deny. Instead, I asked, "Why, Mark? Why did you do it?" There was a long pause, and then he said, "I thought I could have her. I thought you'd forgive me." His words hung in the air, a confession that felt like a betrayal all over again. I could hear the regret in his voice, but it was too late for that. "You thought I'd forgive you?" I finally responded, my voice steady but cold. "You thought betraying me with my fiancée was something I could just overlook?" Mark's breathing was heavy on the other end, the silence between us thick with tension. I didn't plan for it to go this far," he stammered, his usual confidence shattered. "Far? Mark, you've crossed lines that can't be uncrossed. You've not only hurt me, but you've also destroyed everything you had. Your job, your reputation, your car, all gone because you couldn't keep your desires in check." He sighed, a sound of defeat. "I know, Jake, I messed up. But why go to these lengths? Why ruin my life?" I leaned back, the phone pressed to my ear, the city lights outside my window casting shadows across the room. "Because, Mark, actions have consequences. You played a dangerous game and now you're facing the fallout. Did you think there would be no repercussions?" "I didn't think you'd go this far," he admitted, his voice now a whisper. "I didn't go far enough," I countered. "You've not only betrayed me, but also Emily. She's caught in this mess too, and she didn't deserve that." There was another pause, longer this time, filled with the unspoken history of our friendship, now tainted. "What do you want from me, Jake?" Mark finally asked, his tone resigned. "I want you to understand the gravity of what you've done. I want you to live with the consequences. And maybe, just maybe, I want you to learn from this," I said, my voice softening slightly, not out of forgiveness, but out of a deep-seated wish for him to see the error of his ways. "And Emily?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Emily made her choice too. She'll have to deal with her part in this. But that's between her and me. You, Mark, you need to figure out your next move. Because from where I'm standing, your next step should be figuring out how to rebuild, not just your life, but your integrity." The line was silent for a moment before Mark spoke again, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry, Jake. Truly I am. I never meant for any of this to happen." I closed my eyes, the pain of his betrayal still fresh. "Sorry doesn't undo what's been done, but maybe it's a start. Just remember, Mark, this isn't just about me or Emily. It's about you and what you choose to do next." The call ended, leaving me in the quiet of my room, the weight of my decisions and his betrayal still heavy on my shoulders. I knew this wasn't the end. Mark would either rise from this or fall further, and I would watch, ready for whatever came next, because in this game of betrayal and revenge, I had just made my first move. I stood there, watching Mark's face twist into a mask of fury and despair. The venue, once filled with the promise of love and celebration, now echoed with the hollow sounds of our confrontation. Mark's voice was raw, his words slicing through the air like a knife. "You've ruined me," he spat out, his face contorted with rage. I looked at him, feeling a mix of pity and satisfaction. "You did this to yourself, Mark. You betrayed me, and now you're facing the consequences." He lunged at me, but I stepped aside, letting him stumble. I didn't need to do anything, Mark. Karma did the job for me. Mark steadied himself, his eyes burning with a mix of anger and confusion. You think this is karma? You've gone too far, Jake. You've destroyed my life. I shook my head, the weight of my actions settling in. No, Mark. I just set the stage for you to see the consequences of your actions. You made your choices, and now you're living with them. He stared at me, his breathing heavy, his mind racing. What do you want from me, Jake? What's the endgame here? I took a deep breath, the cool air of the venue doing little to calm the storm inside me. I want you to understand, Mark, to really understand what you've done, not just to me, but to Emily, to our friendship, to everything we built together. Mark's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. I get it, Jake. I messed up. But this is too much. I stepped closer, my voice lowering, the anger giving way to a cold resolve. You thought you could have it all, didn't you? My fiancée, your secret business, your smug little life. But life isn't a game, Mark. There are real consequences. He looked away, his gaze falling to the floor where petals from the canceled wedding still lay scattered. I didn't think it would come to this. I watched him. The man I once called my best friend, now a shadow of what he was. And Emily? What about her? Mark's voice was barely a whisper now. She left town, Jake. She couldn't handle the fallout, the guilt. She's gone. The news hit me like a physical blow, but I masked it. Emily's departure was another layer of complexity to this already tangled mess. She made her choice too, Mark, just like you did. He nodded, a tear escaping down his cheek. I know I've lost everything. But what now, Jake? What do I do now? I paused, considering his question. The satisfaction of seeing him suffer was there, but so was a sense of loss for what we had. You rebuild, Mark. You start over. You learn from this if you can. And maybe, just maybe, you find a way to make amends, not just with me, but with yourself. Mark looked up, his eyes searching mine for any sign of forgiveness. Can you ever forgive me? I took a moment, the silence between us heavy with the weight of our history. Forgiveness isn't something I can just give, Mark. You need to earn it, not just from me, but from yourself. Start by making things right as much as you can. He nodded, understanding the gravity of my words. I will try, Jake. I swear I will. As he turned to leave, his figure seemed smaller, defeated. This sentence is grammatically correct, but could be enhanced. I watched him walk away, the venue now a silent witness to the shattered remains of our friendship. The satisfaction I felt was bitter, mixed with a profound sadness for what was lost. I knew this wasn't the end. Mark would either rise from this or fall further. And I would watch, ready for whatever came next. Because in this game of betrayal and revenge, I had just made my first move. But now, standing alone in the empty venue, I realized that the real challenge was not just in the act of revenge, but in the aftermath, in the rebuilding of trust, and in finding a way to move forward. As I watched Mark disappear into the night, the venue felt like a tomb of what could have been. The decorations, once symbols of joy, now seemed to mock the emptiness of the space. I was alone, truly alone, but in that solitude, I found a strange sense of liberation. I walked out of the venue, each step echoing in the vast emptiness, the weight of betrayal lifting with each stride. The cool night air was a balm to my burning thoughts. I realized then that some betrayals don't need revenge. Karma does the job just fine. And sometimes, in the aftermath of chaos, you find a new beginning. What would Jake's new beginning look like? I wandered through the city, my mind clearer than it had been in months. The betrayal had stripped away the illusions, leaving me with a raw, honest perspective. I knew I couldn't go back to the life I had envisioned with Emily. That dream was shattered, but in its place, a new path was forming. I found myself at a small, quiet park, the kind where couples usually sit and watch the sunset. But tonight, it was just me, the stars, and the distant hum of the city. I sat on a bench, the cold metal a stark reminder of my current reality. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through old photos of Emily and me, of Mark and our shared history. Each image was a reminder of what was lost, but also what I had gained. I deleted them, one by one, not out of anger, but out of a need to move forward. The phone buzzed with a message from an old friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. "Heard about what happened. You okay?" It read. I stared at the screen, contemplating my response. "Not really," I typed back. "But I will be. Got any plans for the weekend?" The reply came almost instantly. "Yeah, a group of us are heading to the mountains. You should come. Fresh start, fresh air." I smiled, a genuine smile for the first time in days. Maybe that's what I needed. A change of scenery, a break from the city that held too many memories. I agreed to join them, feeling a spark of excitement at the thought of new faces, new places. As I walked back to my hotel, I felt lighter. The city lights no longer seemed to cast shadows, but rather illuminated a path forward. The next morning, I packed a bag, not with the meticulous care I had for the wedding, but with a sense of urgency and hope. I left the hotel, the venue, and the remnants of my past behind. The drive to the mountains was therapeutic, the road winding through landscapes that were untouched by my personal drama. Arriving at the cabin, I was greeted by friends I hadn't seen in ages. Their warmth was a stark contrast to the cold betrayal I had experienced. We spent days hiking, sharing stories by the fire, and for the first time in a long while, I laughed without the shadow of doubt or pain. One evening, as we sat around the fire, I shared my story, not for sympathy, but to unburden myself. They listened, their faces reflecting a mix of shock, anger, and empathy. "You're better off," one of them said, clapping me on the back. "You've got your whole life ahead of you, Jake. This is just a chapter, not the end." I nodded, feeling the truth in those words. That night, I made a decision. I would start anew, not just in location, but in spirit. I would rebuild my life, not on the ruins of betrayal, but on the foundation of self-respect and new beginnings. Returning to the city, I found a new apartment, one that didn't echo with the ghosts of my past. I began to reconnect with old friends and even made new ones. I took up painting, something I had always wanted to try but never had the time for. Each brush stroke was a step away from the pain, a step towards healing. I also started volunteering at a local community center, teaching art to kids. Their laughter, their unfiltered joy, it was healing in a way. I don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.